Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf and welcome to the very first Austen Awards. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books, and today's video is all about Jane Austen and her books, and that's in honour of Jane Austen July. And this has been my third year participating in Jane Austen July, and I finally read the last book that I needed to read in order to complete Jane Austen's Big Six. So I wanted to come to you with a rankings video, and when I sat down to think about how I would rank Jane Austen's 6 works, that is Northanger Abbey, Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma and Persuasion, I thought that actually there's so many elements to these Jane Austen books that I think that this warrants a video that is a bit more than just my favourites ranked in order from least favourite to most favourite, which in any case is a very difficult task. I will do that ranking, and that ranking is coming to you at the end of the video, so if you want to skip the fun and games before that, you're too eager to get to how I've ranked the 6, then look in the description for a timestamp and you'll be able to go straight to that ranking. So before we get to that, I have one major caveat to this video, and it is that I read Northanger Abbey a very long time ago. So Northanger Abbey was only the second classic that I ever read of my own accord, not for school or anything. So A, it was a very long time ago, and B, I hadn't really yet got into classics, so although that hasn't helped at all in the rankings, I do feel that if I rank these again once I've reread Northanger Abbey, I do feel that the order might be very different, because I do feel that Northanger Abbey, from what everybody else says about it, could definitely be a book that I would really enjoy. I mean, it has a heroine who's really into books, and I don't seem to have any recollection of it whatsoever. So be aware that everything I'm awarding to Austen's books today will not really be a fair reflection on Northanger Abbey. So if Northanger Abbey is one of your favourites, if you feel that someone from Northanger Abbey should have won one of these Austen Awards, please do comment down below so that I can check them out on my next reading of Northanger Abbey. But anyway, I have read all of the others pretty recently. I actually only read Pride and Prejudice for the first time last year. I read Emma for the first time the year prior to that, and I also read Mansfield Park that same year for the first time, and Persuasion I actually read before I was on BookTube, but only by about a month, and I then reread it last Jane Austen July. So before we go on to the awards, there may well be spoilers for all 6 Jane Austen books in this video, so I would highly recommend, if you do not want any spoilers for any of Austen's main 6 books, probably skip this video or come back to it when you've read all that you want to, because I may mention things that will spoiler books. There will be minor spoilers throughout. Before I dish out any of these prestigious Austen Awards, the first award that I considered giving out is Best Side Character. Now, I cannot choose a best side character in Austen. I wanted to say, first of all, that one of my absolute favourite things in Austen, which I was very much reminded of by reading Sense and Sensibility this month for the very first time, is that Austen does characters so well. I feel like Austen must have been such an observer of humans and such an observer of all their various different ways, and I just think her side characters are absolutely on point in every single one of her books. I just couldn't choose a favourite. I do have to give a very honourable mention to Lady Bertram and Pug in Mansfield Park, because I just absolutely love them. It's like a portrait of the laziest woman you could imagine, and I love that. I also must give an honourable mention to, in this book, John Dashwood and his wife Fanny. They are awful, especially Fanny Dashwood. She is just terrible, terrible woman. But her conversation with John early on in this book, where she basically talks him down from giving his sisters thousands of pounds right down to, well, maybe I will help them move their furniture, is just one of the best conversations I have ever read. It's so good. So yeah, Jane Austen's characters are fantastic. If you don't yet appreciate Jane Austen, have a look at any one of her books and don't worry about the main characters. Look at who's in the background. Are they hilarious? Because I can guarantee you that they will either be absolutely full of wit and Austen will be poking fun at something in particular, or they are just such portraits of like evil, or something that you can tell Austen didn't approve of. So love, love, love all of the side characters. Let me know in the comments who is your favourite not main character in Austen, who you just think makes the book what it is. Another who I will give an honourable mention to is Louisa from Persuasion. I just don't think Persuasion would take the turn that it does without the massive event that happens to Louisa, and I think she is a great character for pushing that plot along. If I can't choose a best side character, surely I have a favourite heroine. The Austen Award for Best Heroine for me would definitely go to Anne Elliot. Anne Elliot is the star of Persuasion, and unlike Jane Austen's other heroines, she is a woman who has already grown up. She doesn't have a coming of age storyline. She has a story of regret and lost love, and the fact that she was persuaded to give up on the man that she loved forms the central crux of the story of Persuasion. I think Anne Elliot is a fantastic portrayal of such a thoughtful character, with so many layers. A strong woman, a woman who knows her own mind, but in the past didn't, to her own detriment. And I just think that there isn't a finer heroine in Austen. I think Anne Elliot is amazing. I do think Austen writes good heroines. I enjoy most of her heroines' character arcs, such as they are. I think that Fanny Price is a great character, a really hugely underrated heroine, who I think some people who don't appreciate Fanny Price would just think that she is a weak and feeble character. I don't see her as that at all. I very much identify with Fanny Price in a lot of ways, and I think that she is a really interesting heroine. So basically I've picked two of Jane Austen's least typical heroines as my favourites, and yeah, I think Fanny Price is perceived to be not a strong character, but she absolutely knows her own mind and she does stand up for herself. So yeah, I like her, but she's not my favourite. Next up, we have Best Leading Man. Now, I'm sure that people are going to come at me here, and we all have our favourite leading man in Austen, I'm sure, if we've read Austen. And in my opinion, the leading men in Austen are not always the greatest. I think both Sense and Sensibility and Mansfield Park suffer from not having the greatest of leading men. In fact, their leading men can be extremely unsatisfactory. I also think that the central romance for me isn't the key element in Emma, so therefore I'm not taking my favourite leading man from there either. As I've mentioned, Northanger Abbey could have the best leading man in the world, but I have utterly forgotten the storyline, so I couldn't tell you, unfortunately. That rules out the leading man there, which leaves us with Pride and Prejudice. and Mr. Darcy, and Persuasion and Captain Wentworth. I am firmly team Captain Wentworth. I don't think there is a better leading man in Austen. He is just my favourite. I think Darcy is great. I actually really rooted for Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice. I think he's definitely misunderstood by Elizabeth at the beginning. I don't have a problem with him the way Elizabeth does. But Captain Frederick Wentworth is just an absolutely top-notch leading man. He writes the most romantic letter in any work of fiction. Captain Wentworth, by a long, long way, is my favourite leading man. So the best romance, being as I've picked Anne Elliot as my favourite heroine and I've picked Frederick Wentworth as my best leading man, I would definitely choose as my best romance, of course, the romance in Persuasion. Persuasion is more of a tale of lost love, and I love the turns that the story takes and how it ends. I think it's a brilliant love story. I just don't think any of the other books come close on romance, although Pride and Prejudice is definitely considered one of the best romance stories of all time. I'm not personally a huge fan of the sort of enemies to lovers type thing, and I personally think that Lizzie seems to just change her mind based on Pemberley. So yeah, I do think it comes good in the end, but it's got to be Persuasion. It's got to be Persuasion for that award. So the best villain, it's got to go to my new favourite villain in Austen, and one of my favourite villains of all time, John Willoughby. John Willoughby is a character in Sense and Sensibility, and I think that he is an absolutely brilliant cad. He just, for me, drove the entire plot line of Sense and Sensibility. He and Marianne brought the most interest to the story. Their relationship is very scandalous. It definitely brings a lot of interest to Sense and Sensibility, and I love the twists and turns in Willoughby and Marianne's story, and I just think that Willoughby is actually one of the best characters in Austen. So yeah, definitely best villain, Mr. Willoughby. The best plot point for me, or best action sequence in Austen, if there is indeed any action sequences in Austen, has to be the scene on the cob in Persuasion, right slap bang in the middle of the book. We have a scene in Lyme Regis where it is just so dramatic, and I love that scene. I've spoken about that scene at length in my video comparing Persuasion to its adaptations, so go and check that out if you want to hear my full breakdown of the scene on the cob. But yes, Louisa on the cob, by far and away one of my favourite scenes in Austen, a great plot point and a great action scene. The best humour for me goes to Emma. I think Emma is such a funny story when you look at it. I think it's completely different to most of Austen's work in that we follow Emma, who is mostly a very unlikable character, but I love how unself-aware Emma is at the beginning of her story, and how meddlesome she is, how she tries to matchmake, and there is so much humour in that story. I think it's very, very funny, and I really, really enjoyed it. So best humour goes to Emma. Now, I have another award for best conversation, and I did mention earlier that there's a great conversation in Sense and Sensibility between the Dashwoods at the beginning, which I just thought was brilliant. I think, again, Jane Austen absolutely spot on in how she wrote some of her conversations, but my absolute favourite conversation / confrontation has to go to Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Her absolute rant at Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice is one of my favourite moments of any Austen book. She just is so displeased, and I think it's brilliant. It was a complete turning point for me in the book Pride and Prejudice, the way that Lizzie stood up for herself actually made me come round to her as a character, and the way Lady Catherine de Bourgh absolutely is so unhappy and has such a big rant. I think it's an excellent conversation. I really, really enjoy it. A conversation between two women who are not backing down, and Lady Catherine de Bourgh is fearsome. She is another absolutely brilliant side character in Austen. So the final award that I'm going to award is Best Character Arc, and I'm going to give this to Emma Woodhouse in Emma, because I think that for me, I maybe will appreciate Lizzie Bennet more on a second reading. However, I think that Emma Woodhouse has a stronger and more interesting character arc than Lizzie. Both of them, I think, start out as relatively unlikable. But I think that Emma is more foolish than she is, like, cutting in her remarks at the beginning of Emma. I think she does then realise over the course of the book how terrible she is at times, and I think it's that growing sense of self-awareness that for me makes Emma Woodhouse's character arc so interesting. And so yeah, I'm going to award Best Character Arc to Emma Woodhouse in Emma. So it's been a very chatty video today already. All that remains really for me is to give you my final rankings, and I think you will have some idea from what I've said in the rest of the video. So here goes. I'm going to have to put Northanger Abbey, unfortunately, in position 6, and the only reason I'm doing that is because I cannot remember it, so it would be better if I just ranked the other 5, and so that's what I'm going to do. So in at number 5, may well end up at number 6 once I've read Northanger Abbey, I don't know. And I would like to say that I genuinely did enjoy reading all of these books in their way, but just about coming in 5th, now I've had time to think about it, would be Sense and Sensibility. I only read this one this month. I was actually very fond of a lot of things that happened in Sense and Sensibility, but I do think that next to the other Jane Austen books, it just doesn't quite pull off the plot for me. It doesn't quite have a satisfying love interest and love story. I didn't personally like the final sort of couplings in this, and I thought that the main love interest for the main character who we follow for most of the book, Eleanor Dashwood, I just thought he was not all that Eleanor thought him to be. I personally didn't care too much for him. There are a couple of moments in this plot that are a bit far-fetched, and I think it does come across as an earlier work of Jane Austen, but I still really enjoyed it. I think Sense and Sensibility, what it has going for it is that it's really a lot of fun. I love Willoughby. He's a real sort of love-to-hate type villain, cad, scoundrel. So I think it's a well put together book. Really enjoyed it and would read it again, but it's not my favourite Austen, not by a long way. In at number 4 is where I'm going to get a lot of people telling me that I'm wrong, but it's my opinion. It's my video, it's my opinion, and I personally think that the time in my life that I read this book has not done justice to it. But at the moment, as it stands, this is my 4th favourite Austen, and it is Pride and Prejudice. Please don't turn off the video here. I still enjoyed Pride and Prejudice. I just feel like before I came to read it, I had too much oversaturation of Pride and Prejudice. Having only read this last year, I actually never really felt any strong desire to read Pride and Prejudice, and the reason for that is not because I didn't think I would like it, it's because I felt like I already knew too much about it. So if I'd have read this as one of the first classics I ever read and I hadn't known loads and loads about it already, I would have really stood much more of a chance of enjoying it. It is very accomplished. It is deservedly her most famous book. I can see why that is. I can appreciate why everybody loves Pride and Prejudice without it being my personal favourite. So the other reason I think that this doesn't go higher than 4th is because I didn't love Lizzie Bennet on first reading. It's not my favourite sorry to everybody who it is your favourite. I completely see why people love this, but it wasn't the Jane Austen book for me. For some more controversy, in at number 3 for me is Mansfield Park. Bear with me on this one. Do I think that Mansfield Park has a better plot than Pride and Prejudice? No, not really. But I really like the main character, Fanny Price. I really identified with her. And I think that although this book isn't actually satisfying as a romance, I think it's a really interesting book for telling us about Jane Austen's time. And I also think it's a very mature book from Austen, very different to her others, and I think quite underrated. For me, it was a slow-moving Austen book, but it pips Pride and Prejudice because I just really enjoy the coming-of-age story of a very, very quiet and different heroine. So there we go. Possibly if I was to rate these again in a couple of years, this would be different. I definitely will reread both Mansfield Park and Pride and Prejudice at some point in the future, but this is how I feel at the moment. There are only 2 books left for us to talk about, and I've talked about both of them. Both of them won different categories of award. What is my favourite Austen? Well, coming in second place is Emma. And Emma is a book I enjoy for a completely different reason to my top book by Austen. I enjoy Emma for its humour, I enjoy it for its character arc. I just think that this is a really witty, really interesting, layered book. And yeah, I love it. I love it. And also, most importantly, it gave rise to the film Clueless, which is epic. So yeah. So in at number 1 is of course Persuasion, and I think Persuasion is definitely Austen's most mature work, and for me it's her most interesting. The first time I read this book, I found the opening to be quite slow. I've reread this one, which gives it that very slight advantage over Emma as well, and I found that actually the opening is very interesting in the building of the characters. But for me, what makes this book is that explosive moment in the middle of the book that just changes everything, that is actually a genuine moment of exciting plot. I absolutely didn't know that Jane Austen had written scenes like this. So dramatic, loved it, and I love the ending of Persuasion far too much for it to be anywhere other than first at the moment. I just think Anne Elliot is a great heroine, Wentworth is a great love interest, their love story is brilliant, and this book for me has by far the most romantic moment in all of Austen, the letter. And I'm not even a person who particularly appreciates romance, but I appreciate that letter. I thought it was brilliant, and I think it's a great book, and it's also short. And I think the reason I mention that is that I think that a lot of classics are longer than they need to be. And I think that Persuasion is an example of Austen really knowing how long it will take to tell her story and concisely doing so, and I think it's brilliant. So yeah, Persuasion in at number 1, and that is my ranking of Austen. So let me know in the comments, what are your favourite Austen moments, your favourite characters? Let me know your very favourite overall, or let me know your ranking of the 6 Austen books. I'd love to hear from you. Everything in this video is of course my own opinion. I appreciate everybody else's opinions on these. Having read all 6 of Austen's main books now, I think that they each have their merits, they each have their own strengths, and all of them I enjoyed reading. If you have enjoyed this video today, please do give it a like. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thanks for watching today, and I'll hope to see you all again very soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.